Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for attending, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. First agenda item is we have input on cost of living, and we have a few questions that we would like to ask the board first. So,
Mr. Wohl?
Yes.
Usually we approve the agenda and ask if there's additions or anything. Are we going to do that tonight or not?
Was there any additions that the board would like to make?
Well, I was hoping that we could just review the financial data, because out of our last meeting, I think Mr. King and Mr. Reed are going to get together and agree on some numbers, so I wondered if we could have that first or somewhere on the agenda.
Sure, we could do that before we go into the cost of living. Would Mr. Reep like to start with that? Or Jim?
I certainly can. Mr. Reep and I did sit down for about 20 minutes on Monday to discuss a few things in regards to percentages of your budget that was towards salaries and so forth. And the percentage of budget that we talked about for teacher salaries in regards to line item numbers 110 and 111 was 38.6%, and that was agreed upon between the two of us. We did agree upon the amount of property tax for 2013 and 14 and foundation aid, as well as proposed so forth. So we agreed on that 3.5 million addition there. I had just some questions in regards to, and we clarified the cost of living index at 1.99 that he used for Harlow's to take care of that. We did talk about how it affected career increments and so forth like that. So I guess the basic thing that I wanted to look at was the teacher salary line item numbers 110 and 11, which is coaches' salaries and teacher salaries, and the percentage of the budget that was put forth for those.
Yeah, I would agree with what Jim said. Probably the only other thing that Jim and I spent a little bit of time on was the DEA's proposal and a breakdown of that cost analysis. For both proposals, the freezing of the vertical step in 9-10, and I gave Jim a cost analysis of what that would cost if the board did that, based on both the DEA's proposal and the board's proposal. And when we were all done with that, the number that I gave Jim was that 1.2 million, and he agreed that if there was any anomalies in that, he'd give me a call, and I think we're on the same page.
Very much so. I have the 1.251. Yes.
So I was wondering, are we all agreeing that 3.5 million is the number in the state and local, new state and local funds? So that's what we're agreed on?
Yep.
And I was also curious if have we all agreed that the salary schedule that was presented last time by the board, where it includes the other school districts, that the board's proposal is higher than the salary in Fargo?
For a beginning teacher? Because what we had compared before, the comparisons we made were average salaries, and the one that you did was beginning base salary. And you did a first year, correct, or was that?
We had several years.
You had several, okay.
And that would be this year from 2014-15, and then the board's proposal for 2014-15 as well.
I think before we carry on with that, we'd like to cover some of the cost of living things and talk about that and present some of that data. And then we can come back to that point, okay?
Well, last time, Brian, I remember you said that if we could demonstrate that the board's proposal would be higher than the salary paid in Fargo for Fargo Public Schools, that would go a long ways to settling the negotiations.
No, what we had said is if we could get our teachers close to that number 2, like the Fargo to offset cost of living, since we're number 2 in the state for cost of living, that would go a long ways. And when we compared numbers on the Fargo salary schedule and the presented one and compared cells, you can make them numbers look however you want, but when you start comparing apples to apples, them cells don't line up the way they did on them sheets. And that's why we would like to talk about the cost of living and show the differences.
So you're going to show the differences in the salary schedule between Fargo?
We want to show the differences in the cost of living, because cost of living is much higher here than it is Fargo. And we've been compared to Fargo by Mr. Reap in the newspaper on numerous different occasions on cost of building and other things in the paper. And so, being that it's so much cheaper to build in Fargo than here, and it's so much cheaper to live in Fargo than here, but our salaries are lower. Our take-home pay is lower.
But as you recall, if you look at the Fargo salary schedule, Dickinson is paying more, and Fargo teachers are paid less, and they work 5 more days in their contract. There's a 190-day contract, and the Dickinson's is 185 days, and if you just take that, I would think that would more than make up for the cost of living difference.
However, if you look at their contract, they have more paid holidays than we do also. They have 5 and we have 3, and those are in their contract days. So there is a difference there.
Okay, before we get started talking about the cost of living, I just had a few questions just to kind of refresh things here. Mr. Ross, before we started, do you still stand by your statement made at the October 22nd meeting that, and I quote, "We are in the same place as last year in rents and cost of living, and that hasn't necessarily changed"?
I stand by my statement just like Brian stands by his.
Okay. Well, you know, since we've done a lot of comparing at these meetings with us and Fargo schools, I want to just pull out a few things here. First is a newspaper called The Drill. A couple quotes out of here from Mr. Reap. It's dated Wednesday, October 29th. The statement is that West Fargo's new elementary school costs $142 a square foot, while Prairie Rose, also started in 2012, costs $202. There's another quote in there saying, "Just the price of doing business between Fargo and here, it's just extreme, and yeah, it's the Bakken premium, all right." So I guess my question is, can you explain the Bakken premium? And if we're using the Bakken premium towards building materials, don't you think that as teachers, we're also living under the Bakken premium?
I can't comment on what someone else has said.
Okay, could Mr. Reap then, please?
That particular article was on comparing the cost of construction between the 2 districts. And your numbers are right, John. That was the data that we received from the West Fargo School District. And in terms of construction, when you compare cost of living, I don't know if construction costs are part of that. I think it's some of the data that I saw, and Brian said he was going to bring some tonight. It has groceries and utilities and rent and all of those things that should be considered, but it isn't double. Construction costs might be double, but I certainly don't think the cost of living is double. But if you've got percents, that'd be good.
I have here an ad from Bauer Property Management, and it has a listing of their apartments. 3-bedroom, 1-bath apartment at Century Apartments, which is 12 to 1,300 square feet. And I can give you this verbatim. My fiance lives in Goldmark Apartments in Fargo. She has a 1,300-foot, 3-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. Her rent is $975 a month. In Dickinson, it's $1850 a month. And security deposit in Dickinson, $1,850. Security deposit in Fargo, $600. So that's pretty close to double for the same apartment. Her building was built in 1999. Century Apartments was built in late 70s, early 80s. So there's a heck of a difference right there in cost of living, and that's square footage for square footage.
Also, just to give you a few other numbers to look at. According to the Stark Development Corporation, average sales price of a single-family home went from $234,958 in August of 2013 to $263,039 in August of 2014. That's a difference of 12%. We also talked a little bit at the last meeting about property taxes, and it was said that property taxes are only going to affect the people who own property. So the last question I have is when an individual who owns a rental property sees an increase in their taxes or their utilities, do they pass it on to the renters or do they just absorb it? Because if that, you know, and we know that they pass it down to the renters, so it affects everybody, not just people that own the property, also the people that are renting.
I've just got a couple comments as well. I'm looking at actually some receipts from Dickinson and Fargo right here in front of me. One for McDonald's, and one item, same items, one Egg McMuffin and one sausage burrito. In Dickinson, North Dakota, $5.03. And no, I'm not eating them. $5.03. That was, let me see here, November 3rd of 2014. On November 1st of 2014, the exact same order of an Egg McMuffin and a sausage burrito, $4.39, Fargo. That is a 64-cent difference on the same items at the same restaurant. That, I think, is the Bakken premium. That's almost a 12% increase in prices there. I've been talking to several people in regards to their houses and their prices, and he's got the number for the actual houses sold in August of 2014. The average price was $263,000. If I go year to date, which I took for all 460 units sold in Dickinson, North Dakota, up to August of 2014, the average price was $249,000. On a 30-year mortgage, that's $1,350 per month, which is roughly on a first-year teacher salary, if they buy a house, almost 50%, if not more, of their take-home pay, depending upon aspects there. Because what I figured out with our offer of $43,500 Tart's teacher pay, if you take out the 11.75% TFFR, if you take out the $240 a month for health insurance, and I multiplied it with 24% taxes, which I think was what I found online. It gave them a take-home pay of $2,687 for the year. Divide that out by 12. It's a monthly salary of $2,249. Take $1,350 away. That doesn't leave a whole lot left to live.
For some more information comparing us with Fargo cost of living, we have some data here from a website, one of the leading websites for comparing. Basically, it's saying that if you're earning $49,800 in Fargo, you'd need to earn $61,600 here to maintain the same standard of living. So basically, your cost of living in Dickinson would be about 23.7% higher, or $11,800 higher than your cost of living in Fargo.
And that website is Salary Experts.
Mr. Gray, you are looking at the average salary reported on the DPI website for Dickinson Public Schools, the average, is that correct?
Yeah.
And for which year is that?
Which year was that?
That was 13, 14.
13, 14.
And does it also say which year that was for Dickinson Public Schools salaries? Because I'm not sure that our contract was settled at the time that that figure was published. I don't know. So it could possibly be average salary from the previous year.
Well, even if we're looking at certain salaries, I think it's pretty easy to see that the cost of living, what we're trying to show here is that the cost of living is a lot different in Fargo than it is here. It's much higher here. What figure you put in here, I'm sure it's going to be the same percentage comparing the two.
All right, so I do have a cost of living calculator here, and the source of that is the Council for Community and Economic Research. It's abbreviated C with the numeral 2ER. And if you look at the difference in the cost of living between Fargo and Dickinson, Dickinson is 2% more expensive to live than in Fargo. And this data on the website, excuse me, I didn't make up this data. I'm telling you what's on the website. So let me just continue. It is from the last quarter of 2014, so it's just this past quarter.
I guess we have one more resource that we would like to consult about living expense. And we were approached by some business owners that would like to speak. And at this time, I would like them to come up and talk about the cost of doing business in Dickinson and how much that has changed in the last couple of years.
Mr. Wool, I was wondering if you could clarify the ground rules for us, please.
Where does it say that we can't use a resource person to speak to the group? It does not. It just says they can't sit at the table and bargain.
If you look at number 2 of the ground rules,
So do you object to a business owner telling what their cost of business has changed in the last couple of years as a resource? I mean, it's an individual that owns multiple businesses in Dickinson and would like to speak to the group.
well, my question, Mr. Wool, is what do our ground rules say?
It says both parties that must agree on non-team members to speak, so I'm asking if you have an objection to that.
Also, my other question is this a meeting conducted in public or is it a public forum?
It's a public meeting, but the public does have input. It's our constituents, it's our taxpayers, it's people from our community.
So it's a meeting held in public and not a public forum, is that what you are saying?
Yes. Yes.
By virtue of what you just said, it's not a public forum.
But on the other hand, it says that if the teams agree that we can have an outside party speak. So I'm asking if you have an objection to a resource person from the community speaking as to the validity of the cost of living increase and how their cost of doing business has changed here, not only as far as having to pass increased charges on to members of the community, but how they've had to increase wages or give housing allowances or that type of thing to keep people because of the Bakken premium.
believe that the data you presented has covered it. I also know that, and I mean, we all live here, so it's not a surprise to anyone that it's expensive.
So, 5, please. So then, what you're saying is the board doesn't dispute the fact that the cost of living has gone up in Dickinson, North Dakota by that statement. And it is higher here than other places in the state.
Well, I think Chris had already categorized the data as being, we were 2% higher than Fargo. So,
But our data says this.
and your data says something else.
So let's bring.
That's right. So let's bring a local expert forward and hear from a neutral party that's not at this table.
So are you willing to violate the ground rules?
No, I'm asking if you have an objection, and that's not violating.
The ground rule says
I
right
would
here.
think that you maybe would have asked prior to.
Okay, in number 2, that's what we're talking about, right? Number 2 of our ground rules says, only the board team and the DEA team shall participate at the meetings unless both parties agree to allow a non-team member to speak or participate.
It doesn't say in advance. It doesn't say in advance.
And it does not say in advance, so I'm asking.
I think that since we were agreeing about the cost, it's expensive and there's an increase in cost of living, but we seem to be pretty far apart. It seems to me that needs further research, and I don't know that any of us can resolve it here right now because none of us are economists.
Go ahead with your question.
Which one?
Right.
She stood by the statement. Okay.
Should we take a copy?
reiterate that? We need to reiterate that. She just stood by it. Okay.
Go ahead.
I guess we're going to go back to Mr. Tuchscher's first question to Ms. Ross. You stand by your statement that, I quote, "We are in the same place as last year," and actually we were referring to May of 2013 at that time, in rents and cost of living, and that hasn't necessarily changed. You just stood by that statement. You just stood that by you said, quote unquote, "I stand by the statement like Brian stands by his statement."
For 2000 and 2013, 14
Well,
year?
when you said,
Yes, I stand by it. It was the same as it was then. You asked me in 2013.
No, we asked you at the October 22nd meeting, and you said, "We are in the same place as last year in rents and cost of living. That hasn't necessarily changed." And we asked you that quote-unquote question just a few short minutes ago by John, and you said, "I stand by that statement."
Mr. Fay, that statement is before, of course, before we presented even more data on CPI and consumer price index.
Okay, I understand that, Ms. Ross, but you had that information before Mr. Tuchscher asked you that question at the beginning of our meeting.
No, he asked me if I stood by the statement I made then. Of course I
Okay.
stand by the statement I made then.
Okay.
I made it then.
Do you believe it still?
With the data, I know that through this research, of course, and just like Chris said, that she presented data where Dickinson is 2% higher than Fargo, and you presented data that also presented it. So if you asked me that same question again, would I say the same thing? Probably not, but that was the question you asked me then.
Right, okay. Understand. I read it two different ways, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, another question I have then was at the October 22nd meeting, Ms. Ross, you stated that one thing the board has to deal with was that they approved the budget and the budget cannot be changed. Is that correct?
Did I say that? Is that
Yep.
what you're asking?
Yes. And that's what you believe, that the board can't change the budget?
No, I don't believe the boards can, there can be certain modifications to the budget.
Okay, because at October 10th board meeting, the school board supporting documents reflect that the board can change the budget at any time with simple board action. And at that meeting, when we were talking about budgeting, that was the statement that was made, is that the board has to deal with, they can't change the budget. And so that statement stating that the reason your offer had to stand was because the board couldn't change the budget.
No, that's the words that you just used. I said when we were forecasting, that was after the presumption statement, that we put a placeholder in, and that's when you said it was, or Mr. Fay said it was presumptuous of us to do that. But how do we budget it without putting a placeholder in?
October, it was in October 22nd. So, maybe you should have. Okay. So just for clarification, a local business owner who would like to address the group, yes or no, cannot address us and talk about the cost of living in North Dakota and Dickinson, and they do business in other cities outside of Dickinson and address that. Just yes or no.
Well, Mr. Wool, I think it's been covered.
Okay.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no?
We're going to take a short caucus. We'll be back in 5 minutes. will come back to order. Okay, I would like just a simple yes or no answer from the board that you are in fact refusing to let the resource person from the community speak. Yes or no? That's all we're asking. Not that it was covered, any of that, just yes or no.
Mr. Wall, we would like to adhere to the ground rules, and we do not want to, I really would like to not make this a public forum, but continue to have it be a meeting that's held in public where we can discuss and move towards settling the contract.
So your answer is no, they cannot speak, to be clear, for everybody in the audience.
My answer, Mr. Lowell, is that this is a public meeting, not a public forum. We'd like to keep it that way, and we'd like to stay adhering to the ground rules.
Okay, I would like to address an email that was from the City of Dickinson this morning from Shelley Nominuk, and it addresses wages of an administrative assistant, a police officer, and a solid waste laborer, and their raises from 2010 to 2014, and it's on an average of 10 to 12%. The City of Dickinson has a CPI index they use for the City of Dickinson, and according to Shelley this morning, that is between 3.5% and 5%. And their employees automatically receive that amount each year, plus what they negotiate in. The City of Dickinson also has 16 housing units that they provide free of charge to new employees. 2 of those are actual homes. 6 of them are new FEMA trailers which they purchased, and the rest are mobile homes in one of the mobile home parks. So that's something that they're doing above and beyond. One other fact I would like to address, and this is from the State of the City address, and Dr. Sullivan gave this on Monday morning, that his employees are taxed with a 15 to 20% higher workload than they have been. And so if that is recognized by our district that we have that much higher workload, then why are we battling back and forth not only about cost of living and the money to offset that, but the amount of extra work that we have going on in our district?
Mr. Wolf, I may, was that a quote that I made?
That was given to me secondhand. I was not there. The gentleman that gave me that, I guess we could ask him directly. But that was his quote from you, is what he gave me.
Because I do recall expressing appreciation and recognizing that there is an extra workload because of student mobility. And I did reference that approximately 39% of our students last school year were mobile, but I never used any type of number that said that the employees in this district are taxed with a 10 to 15% extra workload. And what I was expressing was an appreciation for the faculty and for the extra effort that they're putting forth. And probably, in retrospect, what I should have done would have been more global, because the extra workload is actually on all employees in the school.
And that's what they did quote, that it was all employees are taxed with an extra workload of 15 to 20%.
I guess one other question. Is there any way you can show us to verify that number you had with the 2% coming from that C2, was it C2E2 website?
C2ER.
ER, sorry, ER.
Well, I have the papers here, so if you want copies, we can just run copies. Or you want to project it there?
It's going to be difficult for people to see.
Go ahead, John.
It'll readjust. It'll adjust. I learned that last time from Miss Dr. Sells.
Slow it up.
If the amount is below 100, it is lower than the national average. So according to this,
So just to show, like under milk, we know this for a fact that milk in Dickinson, where can you buy it for? Is it $2.72 a gallon? So I'm not sure how valid this would be, because we know for a fact that, I know for a fact, and I don't know how many people here, $2.72 for a gallon of milk in Dickinson. I don't know where you would ever find that.
The housing in Dickinson is below average.
Yeah, ask him that because I gave you them.
I don't know anything about the index. I'm just telling you that I plugged in the city. So it doesn't say, it doesn't quantify how much milk that is or how much ground beef or whatever. Quantity, or the quantity. So we don't know. We're just saying that this is an example of what we were able to find when we looked that up.
Go ahead on that.
Mrs. Fair, I just had another question about this document. Right underneath the top numbers with the overall, the groceries, the housing, it says each cost of living index is based on a national average of 100. If the amount is below 100, it is lower than the national average. If it's above 100, it's higher than the national average. So looking at the housing for Dickinson, according to this document, we're at a 58 and we're that far below the national average for housing. I guess I don't really agree with that.
Mr. Tucksher, like I said, I can't speak to how this is quantified. I'm just saying this is one measure that this is one that I was able to find when you just type in cost of living calculator. So I can't really speak to how they came up with those numbers.
Okay. Thank you.
You probably have to look up the whole index, and it is on. It's quite extensive on the website, and I didn't go through and read 20 pages of how they came up with everything. But it's just one way to look at things.
Thank you.
Well, I think we've kind of proved our point about cost of living, and I don't see that we're really moving ahead on the cost of living. So my question would be is if the board has a counter proposal they would like to offer at this time.
Mr. Wall? Brian, I stood by my statements. Do you stand by all of yours?
Specifically, which one would you like to know?
When I asked you previously if we showed you that the DPS salary schedules was better than Fargo's, you said it would go a long ways in settling these negotiations. How far has it gone?
Well, you haven't shown that our salaries are near what the average salaries reported to DPI are. You chose specific cells and used those, and we used DPI numbers that are reported by districts because we were trying to compare apples to apples, not take our own sampling. We're using public facts that are readily available, not what business managers put together. So in our opinion, that hasn't been shown to us. And that was why when you made the statement at the last meeting about if we could give you the beginning pay of Fargo if we would take it, and I said no, we needed to see the proof. And our average salary still would be nowhere near Fargo, and our cost of living is still much higher.
Because we weren't comparing averages, we were actual cells. We're
Different
comparing
cells.
apples to apples.
Specific
You want to speak to that?
So are you saying that the salary schedules that we gave you and made direct comparisons is not correct?
We would just like to know if you have a counter proposal. That's my question.
No, I asked you a question.
And we would like to know if you have a counter proposal.
There's the agenda right there.
We are at agenda item number 3, and that is a counter proposal from the board, and we would like to know if the board has a counter proposal.
Mr. Wall? Is it true that the DPS proposal is over 100% of the DEA proposal is over 100% of the $3.5 million in state and local funds?
No.
All right, according to what Vince and I sat down with and what we agreed on with the difference of yours to ours and the coaches 8.2% increase in line item 111, which is coaches, and the even with the frozen salary release, it was $1.251 million.
That's just salary, Coach.
Right, that's what we're talking about, just salary.
Which I think she has salary and benefits cost. And the 1.2 is in addition to the board proposal.
This is in difference of, yep.
Yeah.
But the board proposal is $810,000.
1.4.
Well, I'm looking at, you know, the 1,500 times 54,000. The $1,500 on base, which is every $100 is $54,000. We agreed upon that last month, correct? Or last meeting?
Say that again.
That every $100 added to the base was $54,000.
That's
So
correct.
if I take 1,500, that's 15 of the $100 increases. Multiply that by 54,000, I get $810,000.
And then is that the board side?
That would be what the addition to the budget. We assume that for every $100 that we increase to the base, it's $54,000 to the budget.
In increases in salaries. Right.
That was not how we said that. We said that it was $54,000 towards the budget. That was added to the budget.
And that
The
was
actual
Vince's
budget
email.
that we spent in 13-14 was $13,395,000.
So tell me then, for every $100 we add to the base, including benefits, what is the actual number that we need to add to the base or to the?
That would be $54,000.
Okay, so $1,500 times 54,000. So 15 of the $100 increases times 54,000 is $810,000.
Is that the? You're just talking about the board side. The 1,500 on the base.
That's exactly right.
And then another 2,750. And
Then
that
right,
gives
but
us-
what I'm saying is that you just said that your share was 1 point something million.
Yeah.
How do you get that number?
Well, I just took the increase from last year's teacher salaries to this year's, and granted, within that there are additional positions. I think what the question was of the available money from last year's budget to this year's, if you take all positions, salary and benefits, it calculates to over 3.5 million. And I want to make this very clear. Not all of that goes to increases for existing teachers, but we have some data on that that would show that part. But I'm just going from the budget from the previous year to this year. It's more than 100% of all of the monies for salary and benefits for teachers. What you don't have are the new positions in there, Jim. So if you add the 54, 54 times $100 on the base, we agree on that. But from a budget standpoint, you have to go for talk about the money we spent last year to where we are this year. That's the difference. The board added 21 positions this year.
So that 54,000 that you gave us didn't include the full 262 FTEs then?
Yes, it did. But I'm comparing it to the FTEs we had the previous year. I think it was 229 the previous year.
244.
44. What? 21.
242. 240.
18.2.
Yeah.
FTEs, 21 positions, but some are part-time.
So how I came up with my number, Mr. Reap, was utilizing the difference number between our proposal and your proposal, and increasing the coaches by 8.2% as we did in your office, and including the release of the frozen money, and we agreed that was 1.251, and then I just assumed based upon our conversation that every $100 was 54,000. Figured that was 810,000. That's not 3.5 million.
If we don't count the additional positions, that's correct.
Why wouldn't they have been in there? How do we figure out?
Maybe we can put a slide up to help us here. We all have the same problems with the money and trying to follow the money here, and this added to that. I mean, you can see that we're still very confused. With your permission, I would like Mr. Reed to walk through this with us again.
No, I guess we don't really agree with the numbers. We'd like a handout and some time to look through them, and we would like to know if the board has another offer. And if we need to, we can sit down with Mr. Reap one-on-one again and go through them once we've had time to look through these and look at this and talk about the numbers that he gave our bargainer on Monday.
So you want to go back and look at all the numbers all over again? So it's our contention here is that from the numbers that you gave us and from the calculations that we have, that what you're asking for is over 100% of what we have. So that's, for us, do you think we can pay you?
We disagree with those numbers, and we would like time to look through them because they're different than what Monday's figures were, and so we would like time to proof those numbers. And so we are asking if the board has a counter proposal.
Not until we both come to consensus on these numbers.
To Mr. Fay, that 1.2 million, and keep in mind now, this is just salaries. This sheet is just salaries. It doesn't calculate benefits, so we're not going to see that 102% thing on this particular slide. But the 1.2 is the exact same number that's included within this calculation. So, and it doesn't show on here, but I can sit down with you and we can walk through it and see if we agree. I would agree with Brian. That might be a wise thing to do.
Well, and I thought that being that you had that offer as a resource person, when you sat down with our person, them would have been some of the things that would have been washed out on Monday.
But we didn't discuss all of those points.
Well, and
you didn't ask about it, nor did I.
So that's why we would like to have this handout and your numbers and some time to look through these.
I think that's, I mean, I would agree to that.
These, Mr. Wall, these are the questions that I asked my resource person.
I wasn't in that meeting. That was set up
Right,
between Mr. Fay and Mr. Reap.
Right.
And
This slide is a result of questions that I asked.
Okay.
So
And that's-
they had every opportunity to ask the same questions.
evidently he is not a mind reader, and I guess these are questions that if this was things that would have been brought up, Mr. Reap as a resource person would know, because he has access to all of the FTEs, what the benefits are, and all of the money. So I think we need to have this handout, have the numbers, and have time to go back through these. If the board has no counter proposals, then I think we are adjourned.
Next meeting, the next meeting.
We need a next meeting, which will be next week, Wednesday. Correct?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they said no.
No?
They have something going on, they just said.
I am.
Jim, I won't be available between now and next week.
And I'm with volleyball and stuff, you know, it depends on what we do have there, so I don't know what to tell you.
And there's no school Monday.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can make next Wednesday.
Okay. How about the following week?
Sorry, I'll be in New York.
Jim, maybe if you and I and whoever else you want to come can meet, and then we can have Violet send a meeting wizard to see when the next available time, after we've sat down and gone through some of that.
Do you agree?
Yep. We'll meet with Mr. Reap and go through these, and then we'll give Twyla some dates and see what we can match up. Okay? Meeting adjourned then. Thank you.